After a poor husband donated his kidney to save his wife's dying father, the world called him a hero, but heroes don't always get happy endings. Noah Wilder gave his blood, his body, and his future to keep her family alive. But when her father opened his eyes again, his wife closed her heart. Savannah Carter Wilder stood beside his hospital bed wearing a diamond smile, already thinking of a richer man who could buy her the life Noah's kindness never could. He gave life, but she gave betrayal. He saved her father, but she destroyed his soul. Now whispers travel through Dallas. How could a woman divorce the man who saved her father's life just to marry a millionaire? And what kind of man gives away an organ, only to lose everything else that mattered? But when love turns to humiliation, and kindness turns into a weapon, who will survive what Noah does next? The hospital lights hummed with a sterile glow that didn't care about love stories or sacrifice. Noah Wilder lay on the narrow bed, pale, one hand tethered to an IV bag, the other loosely curled near the scar on his abdomen. Just hours ago, that scar hadn't existed, and now it marked the piece of him he'd given away to keep another man alive. A few rooms away, that man, Samuel Carter, his father-in-law, was breathing because Noah had donated his kidney. It wasn't obligation. It was love. Love for Savannah, the woman sitting now at the foot of his bed, scrolling through her phone with a silence that wasn't worry. It was distance. When the surgeon had told him, "You're a match," Noah had cried from relief. Savannah hadn't. She'd simply said, "That's kind of you," before calling her father to give him the news like she was confirming a delivery. Now, the smell of antiseptic mixed with something unspoken. Noah smiled weakly. "Your dad's stable, right?" he asked, voice rough. Savannah nodded, eyes still on the glowing screen. "Yeah, he'll be fine." They said he's talking again. "Good," he whispered. "That's all that matters." But it wasn't all that mattered. Not anymore. When she finally looked at him, there was pity in her eyes, not love. The kind of pity that feels like a prelude to goodbye. He didn't know then that pity would soon turn into contempt. Noah had always been the man who believed love could fix people. His mother raised him that way. She'd stayed with a cheating husband because she said forgiveness made her strong. When she died, Noah told himself kindness was the only legacy worth inheriting. He didn't know Savannah came from a world where kindness was currency to be spent, not kept. 3 weeks later, while he recovered at home, Savannah started dressing like she was late for something glamorous. Business meetings, charity galas, design consultations, all with clients Noah had never met. That's when he first heard Ethan Moore's name, the new investor who was helping her relaunch her design studio. Noah didn't think much of it then. Ethan was older, married, powerful, the kind of man Savannah had always wanted him to learn from. But kindness blinds, and blind men don't see danger until it's standing at the foot of their bed, pretending to care. That night, as Noah drifted to sleep beside her, she turned away when he tried to touch her. "I'm tired," she said. He didn't know it was the beginning of the end. But the audience watching him, they would. Because every love story that begins with sacrifice always ends with the truth. Kindness without boundaries always invites betrayal. The first time Noah noticed Savannah's laughter change, it was over dinner. It wasn't the soft, affectionate sound he'd fallen in love with. It was lighter, practiced, like something she rehearsed in front of mirrors. She was on her phone again, smiling down at her screen between forkfuls of salad, the reflection of the text messages flashing in her wine glass. "Work again?" Noah asked. His tone was casual, but his chest ached the way a man's does when he already knows the answer. Savannah didn't look up. "Clients don't sleep when money's involved." He nodded. He wanted to believe her. He always wanted to believe her. That was his first weakness. Later that night, when she showered, her phone lit up on the dresser. A message preview blinked. "Can't stop thinking about last night. Same suite?" It was signed with the name Ethan. Noah's hand froze over the phone. For a moment, the world stopped breathing. Then he exhaled and stepped away. Because men like Noah didn't believe in confrontation, they believed in faith. Faith that maybe there was another explanation. Faith that love still had a chance. Faith that kindness could still buy loyalty. But kindness couldn't outbid greed. Over the next weeks, Savannah's world began to expand while Noah's shrank. Her perfume got more expensive, her tone more dismissive, her touch colder. The woman he once held through sleepless nights now treated him like a charity she was tired of supporting. One afternoon, He stopped by her studio unannounced with takeout her favorite Thai noodles. But she wasn't there. Her assistant's voice trembled when she said, she left for a meeting at the Monroe Hotel with Mr. Moore. Noah stood outside that hotel for 30 minutes, heart pounding so hard it felt like the echo of surgery all over again. When the revolving door finally turned, Savannah emerged laughing, Ethan's hand on her back, his face too close to hers for anyone to call it business. Noah turned before she saw him. He didn't shout. He didn't break down. He just walked away, the paper bag of noodles growing colder with every step. That night he ate alone, staring at the scar on his stomach, realizing he had traded an organ to save a man whose daughter was already giving her body to someone else. He didn't tell her he knew. He couldn't. His mother once told him, when people betray you, don't let them see you bleed. Let them think you never noticed until it's too late. So he smiled. Every morning he made her coffee, fixed the leaky faucet, kissed her forehead before she left, and then he hired a private investigator. Liam Grant was older, ex-FBI, a man who didn't waste time. Within weeks he had pictures, videos, even bank transfers. Savannah had been receiving business funds from Ethan through a fake consulting account. There were hotel bookings, private jet records, and one particularly cruel photo, Savannah in Ethan's lap, laughing, wearing the same necklace Noah had saved 2 months to buy her anniversary gift. Noah didn't sleep that night. He sat in the dark, staring at the flash drive on the table. He could expose her now, destroy her instantly, but that wasn't enough. Not anymore. He wanted her to think she'd won first. He wanted her to divorce him because then he could destroy her legally, financially, publicly, and permanently. And as Savannah lay beside him that night, pretending to dream, Noah whispered to the darkness, "You're going to regret underestimating the man who saved your father's life." She didn't stir. She couldn't hear him. But the darkness did, and it was listening. Noah signed the papers like a man in a play, hands steady, face hollowed by a grief the world could read and buy. The courthouse smelled faintly of lemon and old leather. Cameras crowded the steps like vultures, waiting to snack on scandal. Savannah stood beside Ethan on the courthouse lawn, her smile practiced, arm looped through his. They both looked like winners. The city looked like it had already picked sides. Noah let them have it. He let the world think he was the ruined husband, the tragic figure who had given away his body only to be thrown away in return. That image would be useful. Inside, in the judge's chamber, the divorce was procedural custody papers, asset disclosures, the marital house evaluated. Savannah's lawyer pushed for alimony. Ethan's team made vague promises about support and stability. Noah answered with 2 words that became the headline, "I consent," reporters scribbled. Social feeds lit up. Streams of sympathy poured in for the man who donated his kidney and got divorced for his trouble. He cried on cue in front of cameras, voice breaking, telling a story the public wanted to hear. The poor husband who saved a life and lost everything. He left the courthouse with the sympathy of strangers and the scorn of the elite, exactly as he meant to. That night, Savannah posted a photo of her in a black dress, champagne in hand, Ethan behind her like a statue. The caption was triumphant. "New chapter." Comments applauded. Her father recovered and sat quietly in the hospital's VIP suite, smiling with the smugness of a man who had traded his daughter's loyalty for comfort. Noah watched the post and let the sting sink in. He didn't post. He didn't respond. He wanted the narrative to breathe. He wanted them to believe they'd buried him. He moved out the next morning. A few boxes, the dog, the scar across his abdomen like a secret map. He rented a small downtown apartment, concrete, no pretense, and announced to only one person that he had a plan, Elena Brooks. She arrived within 48 hours, briefcase in hand and a look that said she liked complicated fights. She had been the woman Noah called when he decided to stop being a victim and start being a strategist. Elena listened to the story once, twice, then nodded. "We build a case," she said. "Not so you win a divorce, Noah. We let justice do what pity can't." He hired Liam Grant to sift through their life like a forensic archaeologist. Liam came back with invoices, hidden accounts, and a ledger that smelled faintly of corruption. Savannah's so-called consulting income traced back to Ethan's corporate shell companies. More, gifts, hotel bookings paid in cash, a ledger entry labeled Personal Savannah. Elena smiled when Liam showed her the files. She liked leverage as a lawyer likes a sharp pen. "We'll need proof," she said. "Medical records, bank transfers, witness statements. And if the kids aren't yours, Noah, we need DNA." Noah's breath caught like cold air. He had loved those children with the kind of blind devotion he thought was unbreakable. The thought of testing them made his throat close. But hatred had a precise edge. He remembered his mother's voice. "When people betray you, prepare to do what kindness never could." So he signed the retainer, swallowed the pain, and let his grief become strategy. He'd let Savannah and Ethan live the lie they wanted: their lavish dinners, their engagement parties, the elevating press because arrogance made people sloppy. People who believed they already had everything stopped checking the locks. On a late autumn night, Noah watched a live stream of Savannah laughing with Ethan on a rooftop, lights like a private constellation around them. He felt nothing. Not yet. The camera cut to a close-up of the couple kissing, the chat filled with flame emojis and congratulations. Noah closed the laptop and touched the scar at his side. He had given a piece of himself away. Now he intended to take everything else that mattered to them. But before he could strike, one question sat heavy in his chest and refused to leave. What if the children weren't his? What would he do then disown the very things that had kept him human? Noah learned to rebuild in silence. Revenge needed patience, and patience required the kind of emptiness only heartbreak could teach. His apartment was small, quiet, and efficient, like a man's war bunker disguised as a studio. In the morning he drank black coffee, in the afternoon he read business filings, and at night he watched old construction footage of the projects Ethan had stolen from him. His eyes traced every column, every invoice, every betrayal hidden in fine print. It wasn't grief anymore. It was research. Liam visited often, always after dark. He'd drop a flash drive on the counter and say things like, "Another account," or, "You'll want to see this." Each one revealed new layers: Savannah's secret property purchases, Ethan's offshore holdings, shell companies registered under her maiden name. The world called her glamorous. Noah now saw a thief in silk. By the third month, he owned 2 businesses under aliases, companies quietly bidding against Ethan's conglomerate for the same contracts. He wasn't trying to win. Not yet. He was studying Ethan's weaknesses, mapping his empire's cracks. He wanted to know how Ethan thought, how he moved, what his ego couldn't resist. Because revenge wasn't chaos, it was engineering. And Noah was still an engineer. Elena's voice kept him anchored. "We build evidence, not anger," she said during one of their late-night meetings. "Anger burns fast. Evidence burns forever." She drafted the first of many suits, one for breach of fiduciary duty, one for slander after Savannah told the press he'd emotionally manipulated her, and one sealed motion for paternity confirmation. Noah hesitated at that last one. "If they're not mine," he whispered, "I lose the last good thing I thought I built." Elena looked at him over her glasses. "Then you stop living on lies." The DNA results came back 2 weeks later. None of the children were his. Noah didn't speak for hours after reading the report. He sat at the window, watching the traffic below, realizing that his entire life had been a performance staged by other people. The children he had tucked into bed, the laughter that had softened long nights, the family photos on the mantle, all built on a stranger's bloodline. He packed those frames into a box that night and drove them to the dumpster behind his building. When he came back upstairs, he poured himself a drink and began drafting letters to his attorney. The next morning, the first legal strikes hit. Elena filed quiet petitions that didn't make headlines yet: asset tracing, fraud inquiry, paternity fraud notice, perjury alerts to the licensing board of Savannah's firm. Ethan's accountants received subpoenas. Savannah's design clients got discreet notices of pending investigation. None of them pointed back to Noah directly. He wanted confusion to bloom before recognition. By the time Savannah learned about the audits, she and Ethan were busy planning their engagement gala at the same hotel where she'd first betrayed him. She called Noah that week, voice trembling for the first time. "Are you doing this?" she asked. "Because if you are, you'll regret it." Noah smiled into the receiver, the kind of calm smile that terrified people who once thought they understood you. "Savannah," he said softly, "regret is for people who still care." Then he hung up. That night, Dallas News aired a small story about an anonymous whistleblower exposing illegal bidding practices tied to Ethan Moore's company. Noah watched the segment in silence, then opened a folder on his laptop labeled Stage 2. Inside it, 15 tabs waited, each named after a phase of his revenge plan. He clicked the first one, Reversal of Sympathy. Outside, the city lights blinked against his window like applause he didn't need. Inside, Noah's face reflected in the glass looked like a man finally remembering what it felt like to stop being kind. Savannah woke up to chaos. Her phone buzzed nonstop, the screen flashing headlines she never thought would carry her name. Ethics investigation targets more and wilder designs. Anonymous whistleblower leaks. Evidence of insider deals. Dallas. Designer under scrutiny over misused charity funds. By 8 a.m., the sponsors had pulled out of her upcoming gala. By 10, a client froze her payment. By noon, reporters waited outside her condo. Ethan tried to steady her, his tone clipped with the arrogance of a man who'd always believed money fixed everything. "This will blow over," he said, slipping into his tailored suit. "We'll call a press conference, deny everything, and pivot the narrative." But the narrative had already escaped him. Online forums flooded with screenshots, emails, bank records, voice notes. Each one painted a picture of greed and deceit. One message thread showed Savannah bragging about how her ex-husband's donation bought her father more time to enjoy her success. Another featured Ethan laughing about how he'd saved her from poverty. The city that once admired them now spat their names with disgust. Noah didn't post. He didn't trend. He just watched. Because Stage 2 wasn't just exposure, it was psychological isolation. At night, he'd drive past their gated mansion and see paparazzi flashing bulbs as Savannah yelled at Ethan on the driveway. He didn't need to imagine what she was saying. He could read it in her posture, the tremble of a woman who'd built her life on sand and was now watching the tide come in. Liam kept feeding the fire. Every 2 days, a new leak. Some public, some anonymous. Each one dropped with surgical precision. Savannah's fake invoices, Ethan's shell companies, her father's involvement in a false medical donation scheme that Noah had once unknowingly funded. The true brilliance lay in how Noah orchestrated it. He never broke the law. He only removed the lies that protected them. The first time Savannah tried to confront him was in a parking lot outside his office. Her makeup looked heavier, desperate, as if foundation could fix the cracks in her reputation. "Why are you doing this?" she hissed. "You said you loved me." Noah studied her for a long moment. "I did," he said finally. "But love without truth is just debt. I'm collecting mine." Her eyes filled with tears that didn't move him. "You'll destroy yourself with this." He smiled faintly. "You already did that for me." She turned away, trembling, muttering something about forgiveness. But forgiveness was never on his agenda. Stage 3 was already in motion. That night, Noah's attorney filed a motion to reopen the divorce case under grounds of fraudulent concealment, a move that would bring everything into court again, this time publicly. Elena's strategy was flawless. Once the paternity results were entered into evidence, Savannah and Ethan wouldn't just face social disgrace, they'd face perjury and financial penalties that could cripple their empires. Meanwhile, Savannah's father, Samuel Carter, began receiving anonymous packages, copies of financial records linking him to embezzled hospital donations. The guilt started gnawing at him like a second illness. He called Savannah, begging her to fix whatever this is. She screamed at him, said it wasn't her fault, then hung up mid-sentence when another call came in, her biggest investor withdrawing support for ethical reasons. By morning, Ethan's company stock dropped 18%. By evening, his face appeared on the evening news under the headline, "Real Estate Mogul Under Federal Review." In the middle of it all, Noah sat at his small kitchen table with a glass of water, watching the chaos unfold across multiple screens. There was no joy in his expression, only precision. Elena texted him. "Stage 4? He typed back. "Not yet. Let them drown first." As the city turned against them, Savannah's phone stopped ringing. Her friends vanished. Her so-called allies blocked her. Even her father refused to answer calls now that reporters had camped outside his driveway. In the space of 3 days, she lost everything she'd traded love for. But what she didn't know, what she couldn't imagine, was that Noah hadn't even started the real revenge yet. He wasn't after her reputation anymore. He was after her peace. And peace, once broken, never returns the same. The courtroom smelled of polished wood and tension. Cameras flashed outside like lightning, their sound muffled by the thick glass doors. Reporters whispered words like betrayal, paternity scandal, revenge, and every headline had the same three names: Noah Wilder, Savannah Carter, Ethan Moore. Savannah sat at the plaintiff's table, hands folded tightly, pretending calm. Her once glamorous curls looked brittle under fluorescent light. Across from her, Ethan whispered something meant to sound reassuring, but his eyes kept darting toward the press gallery. They were both wearing the kind of poise money buys when dignity runs out. Noah entered quietly, dressed in a simple navy suit. No jewelry, no theatrics, just calm precision. The room seemed to inhale as he walked past them without a glance. The man who'd once donated his kidney to save his father-in-law now looked like he could cut steel with his silence. Judge Mason Cole adjusted his glasses and nodded. "We are reopening case 422 D.F. Wilder versus Wilder. The motion concerns claims of concealed paternity fraud and financial misrepresentation. Mr. Wilder, your counsel may proceed." Elena Brooks rose. Her voice was clean, deliberate, and lethal. "Your Honor, we intend to show that during the marriage, Mrs. Savannah Carter Wilder knowingly misled my client about the paternity of 2 children, and that she engaged in ongoing financial deception while benefiting from Mr. Wilder's organ donation to her father." The words landed like glass breaking. Savannah's attorney objected, citing emotional prejudice. Overruled. Elena tapped her folder and clicked the remote. A large monitor flickered on photos, bank transfers, hotel records, and finally, a document titled DNA Verification, Exhibit 14. The courtroom murmured. Noah didn't flinch. As Elena continued, "The DNA results show neither child biologically belongs to Mr. Wilder. Both were fathered by Mr. Ethan Moore." Gasps rippled through the courtroom like a storm front. The judge called for order, but the air had already shifted. Savannah's eyes widened, and her fingers tightened around Ethan's wrist. He tried to pull his hand free, face pale. "This is outrageous," her lawyer began. Elena interrupted, sliding another document forward. "We also submit into evidence proof that Mr. Moore used company funds to cover Mrs. Wilder's studio expenses, personal travel, and lodging at the Monroe Hotel during the same period she was still married to my client." Savannah shook her head violently. "That's not true. Those were business trips." Elena turned to Noah. "Mr. Wilder, when did you first suspect your wife's infidelity?" Noah looked straight ahead. "The day she stopped looking at me like I was enough." The answer silenced the room. Elena nodded slowly. "And yet you continued to support her financially, even after discovering the affair?" "Yes." "Why?" "Because I wanted her to believe she'd won. People show their truest selves when they think the consequences are gone." Elena let that hang for a moment before facing the judge again. "Your Honor, we move to award Mr. Wilder full ownership of joint marital assets under the clause of fraudulent misrepresentation and request the immediate transfer of liability for all incurred debts to Mrs. Wilder and Mr. Moore." Savannah's lawyer fumbled through papers. "That's absurd. They shared everything equally." "Not everything," Elena replied sharply. "She kept the truth." Judge Cole leaned back, his expression unreadable. After a long silence, he said, "I've reviewed the evidence. The court finds sufficient grounds for punitive damages against both defendants. Mr. Wilder's petitions are granted in full." The gavel struck once. Savannah's composure cracked like glass. She reached across the table, whispering to Ethan, "Say something, do something." Ethan didn't. His jaw tightened as he turned toward the door, abandoning her mid-panic. Cameras waited outside for him. Reporters would devour the footage. Noah stood quietly, watching Savannah crumble under the weight of her own lies. The same woman who once mocked him for being poor now sat in a courtroom, stripped of power, fortune, and illusion. As bailiffs cleared the room, Savannah caught his eye, the same eyes that once looked at her with worship. "You destroyed me," she whispered. Noah stepped closer, his voice calm. "No, Savannah. You destroyed yourself. I just turned on the lights so you could finally see it." He walked away, leaving her in the silence of her own ruin as cameras flashed outside like lightning for the world to see. But that was only the public end of her fall. The private destruction had only just begun. Outside the courthouse, chaos waited like a storm. Microphones thrust forward, flashbulbs burst, and voices tangled into a single roar. Noah, how does it feel to win? Savannah, did you cheat? Ethan, any comment on the DNA? Noah stepped out first, calm under the flashes. He didn't smile. He didn't speak. He simply placed a hand on Elena's shoulder and walked through the crowd like a man who had already left this world behind. Reporters shouted his name, but he moved like someone untouchable. A man no longer defined by betrayal, but by restraint. Savannah emerged next. The noise grew louder, uglier. Homewrecker! Someone yelled. Gold digger! Another spat. The insults fell like stones, and for the first time, she looked like a woman who truly understood gravity. Ethan followed, face red, jaw set tight, and when a reporter asked, Mr. Moore, how long were you sleeping with your business partner's wife? He shoved past them into a black SUV without answering. By evening, every news outlet in Texas carried the footage. The story wasn't just gossip anymore. It had become moral currency. The poor man who gave his kidney had been betrayed by the very woman whose father he saved. The betrayal was national. The revenge was legendary. The narrative was unstoppable. But while the world feasted on their humiliation, Noah was already on to stage 5, peaceful exposure, destroying them by letting truth, not rage, carry the punishment. He returned home to find Liam waiting on his porch with a quiet grin. You've done it, the investigator said. She's finished. Ethan's company's under audit. Carter's old fraud charges just resurfaced. You can stop now. Noah looked at him for a long time. Stopping isn't peace, Liam. It's just silence. I'm not looking for silence yet. He poured 2 glasses of water, not wine. Do you remember when I said kindness is a weapon? He asked. I wasn't lying. People like them never fear cruelty, they expect it. What kills them is mercy they can't buy back. 2 weeks later, Savannah's world turned darker. The luxury cars disappeared one by one, repossessed. Her design studio was shuttered under unpaid taxes. Her father, exposed for the hospital embezzlement, suffered a relapse and was quietly admitted to the same facility Noah had once saved him for. She tried calling Noah. He didn't answer. Then came the interviews. The same talk shows that once praised her now tore her apart. Clips of her old arrogance were replayed beside the courtroom footage. Every laugh she'd shared with Ethan became evidence of deceit. She tried to defend herself, to say Noah had plotted this all along, but every word only made her guilt sound rehearsed. At a restaurant downtown, Ethan sat alone. His lawyers had dropped him. His wife, Grace, had filed for divorce after testifying against him. He stared at the television over the bar as a news anchor said his name, alongside the words, bankruptcy and fraud. And in another part of Dallas, Noah sat in his quiet apartment, watching the same broadcast. There was no smile, no thrill, just a long exhale. The world had turned them into villains without him lifting a hand. Later that night, Elena called. It's over, she said. No, Noah replied softly. It's public. That's different. He walked to the window. Across the city skyline, one billboard flickered the same brand Ethan once owned. The lights sputtered and went dark. Down below, the traffic lights blinked green, then red, then green again. Noah's reflection hovered faintly in the glass. He had won, but revenge doesn't heal. It empties. Still, he whispered to the night, they took peace from me. I just gave it back the only way I knew how. In a penthouse miles away, Savannah sat by the window of a dark apartment, scrolling through old photos of her children. Her father's medical debts were now hers. Ethan had vanished. The silence around her was unbearable. She stared at her reflection and whispered, what kind of woman does this to the man who saved her father's life? And though no one answered, the question echoed through her empty home until morning. But Noah's final strike, the one meant to break not her image but her legacy, was still waiting. He wasn't finished yet. A quiet Dallas dawn spread over the skyline, but Noah was already awake. The city glowed faintly beneath the clouds, unaware that the last act of his revenge was about to unfold. He stood by the window, coffee cooling beside him, watching the sun rise over the empire that once belonged to Ethan Moore, the man who'd taken everything from him. Today, Ethan's name would vanish from the world he'd built. Noah didn't need violence. He had precision. Stage 8 of his plan, legacy collapse, was never about destruction. It was about erasure. Liam had uncovered the final set of files weeks ago, documents proving that Ethan's construction empire had been built partly on falsified contracts and bribes. Elena had kept them sealed, waiting for the right moment of day when the story would hit hardest. When public sympathy for Noah was at its highest, that day had come. At 10 a.m., national media broke the story. More developments implicated in federal fraud scheme. The exposé was backed by leaked emails, company ledgers, and one brutal quote from an anonymous insider. He destroyed an honest man to build a crooked empire. By noon, federal agents raided Ethan's headquarters. The footage looped on every news channel. Boxes of files carried out, employees escorted off-site, and Ethan Moore himself led away in handcuffs. His face, once composed and untouchable, now looked like a man who'd finally met the consequence of believing he was above mercy. Noah watched in silence. No celebration, just stillness. Savannah saw it too. Her scream echoed through the empty apartment, her world folding in on itself. The man she'd left her husband, for the man she'd destroyed her marriage to impress, was now the same man whose downfall had her fingerprints all over it. She called her father, but he was still in the hospital, too weak to answer. The reporters were at her door again, this time calling her the woman who destroyed 2 men and an empire. By evening, Ethan's assets were frozen, his face on every screen. Grace, his estranged wife, held a press conference calm, poised, and devastating. "My husband's greed ruined lives," she said, but none more than the man who once showed him kindness. It was the final public nail in Ethan's coffin. That night, Noah attended a charity gala not for celebration, but for symbolism. It was the same event Savannah and Ethan had once attended together, flaunting their wealth. Now, whispers followed him through the room. "That's him, the husband who gave his kidney, the one who won everything back." People tried to shake his hand, to offer congratulations. He accepted none of it. He just smiled faintly and said, "Kindness doesn't lose, it just waits." As he left, the media caught a photo of him calm, backlit by chandeliers, his face unreadable. It became the picture that defined the entire saga. Hours later, a knock echoed at his apartment door. When he opened it, Savannah stood there. No makeup, no heels, just a trembling woman with the same eyes that once looked down on him. "Please," she whispered. "I've lost everything. I can't even walk into a store without people whispering. Ethan's in jail. My father's sick again. I have nothing left. Not even the kids, they don't want to see me. Please, Noah, just tell them I'm not a monster." He studied her in silence. For the first time in years, she looked human, stripped of pride, stripped of polish. "You're not a monster," he said softly. "You're just a warning." She started to cry, reaching for his arm. He stepped back. "You wanted a rich man, Savannah. You found one. But you forgot riches don't change hearts. They only reveal them." Her sobs broke the air, but Noah didn't move. He had forgiven her in a way no one could see, not to set her free, but to finally set himself free from the weight of what she'd done. When she turned to leave, he spoke one last time. "Do you remember what you told me in the hospital after I saved your father?" She looked up, eyes wet. "You said, you didn't have to do it. My dad would have found another donor." He nodded slowly. "You were right. I didn't have to. And you didn't have to betray me either. But here we are." The door closed gently between them. Outside, the night carried her sobs into the dark. Inside, Noah exhaled, not in triumph, but in peace. He walked to the window, looked out at the city, and whispered, "Stage 9 complete." And though his face stayed calm, his reflection looked different now, not broken, not vengeful, but empty in a way only justice can leave a man. The final stage, stage 10. Oblivion would come not from him, but from time. Because people like Savannah and Ethan never die once. They die slowly every day the world forgets them. Years passed like pages in a book no one wanted to reread. Dallas grew new towers, new scandals, new names to whisper about. But every once in a while, someone mentioned the story of the man who gave his kidney and lost his wife to the man he once trusted, and how he turned it all around without ever raising his voice. Noah Wilder no longer lived in the city. He'd moved north to a quiet coastal town, built homes for veterans, mentored young architects, and gave scholarships under a foundation that bore no trace of his name. He lived simply, the way only men who have seen too much noise can. Every morning, he still woke early, coffee in hand, watching the sunrise from his porch. Some scars ache forever, but his didn't hurt anymore. They just reminded him of what he'd survived. He'd rebuilt himself in silence, the kind of silence that humbles men who once mistook kindness for weakness. His apartment in Dallas had become an office for his nonprofit. His reputation had become legend, though he never sought it. Across the state, Savannah Carter lived in a small rented townhouse under her maiden name. Her father had passed away 2 winters ago, a quiet funeral, barely attended. Ethan Moore was still in prison, his empire auctioned off piece by piece. Savannah's life was quieter now, but not peaceful. She worked part-time as a receptionist in a medical clinic, avoiding the curious stares that came whenever someone recognized her face from an old article. Sometimes, she'd hear Noah's name mentioned on the radio, in charity circles, in whispered admiration. Every mention cut her deeper than the last. There was no anger in her memories anymore, only grief for the version of herself that could have chosen love over greed. One Sunday morning, she found herself standing outside the charity office bearing Noah's initials carved on the plaque, Wilder Foundation for Restoration and Renewal. She stood on the sidewalk for nearly 10 minutes, hands trembling, watching volunteers go in and out. Children laughed inside. There were photographs of rebuilt homes, happy families, all funded by the man she'd once destroyed. When Noah walked out, carrying files, he didn't notice her at first. His hair was streaked with silver now, his suit simple but clean. He looked older, wiser, free. Savannah called out softly, "Noah." He turned, startled. For a moment, silence filled the space between them. Time had reshaped both of them in opposite directions. "I shouldn't have come," she said, voice trembling. I wanted to see the man who taught me what I never understood." He didn't answer right away. He simply looked at her, then said gently, "You taught me something too." Her eyes lifted hopefully. "What?" "That love without integrity isn't love, it's theater. And I'm done performing." Savannah blinked back tears. "Do you hate me?" Noah shook his head. "No. Hate would mean I still care. I just don't carry it anymore." She nodded slowly, the weight of finality pressing down on her. "I just wanted to say, thank you, for saving my father, even after everything." Noah's eyes softened, but his tone stayed calm. "I didn't do it for thanks. I did it because I believed kindness could heal anything. I was wrong, but it still saved me." For a long moment, they stood in silence. Then Savannah turned to leave, disappearing into the noise of the city, another face lost in the rhythm of people trying to outrun their pasts. Noah watched her go, then looked up at the sky. It was a bright morning, the kind that didn't ask for forgiveness, just continuation. He whispered to himself, "Stage 10, complete." In the distance, a volunteer's laughter broke the quiet. He smiled faintly, realizing that peace isn't the absence of pain, it's learning to live in a world where it no longer defines you. And as he walked back inside, someone greeted him with a handshake and a question. "Mr. Wilder, how do you stay so calm after everything you've been through?" He smiled. "Because some stories end not when you win, but when you finally stop fighting." The door closed behind him, and the world outside moved on, never knowing that one of the greatest wars ever fought wasn't waged in blood or wealth, but in the quiet, merciless heart of kindness itself. Rain came softly that night, the kind that blurs the city lights into watercolor and makes everything look like a memory. Noah sat in his study, alone but not lonely, reading through old journals. The pages smelled faintly of dust and ink and time. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled, gentle, patient, like an old friend reminding him how far he'd come. He'd written once, years ago, on the day Savannah left him, "Some wounds never heal. They teach." Now he read that line again and smiled, realizing it was no longer true. Some wounds don't teach, they transform. On the table lay a small photo frame he hadn't seen in years. It showed him and Savannah at their wedding, both smiling, the world still unbroken. He traced a thumb across it, then set it down face first. It wasn't bitterness anymore, just closure. The television murmured faintly in the background. A documentary played, The Man Who Rebuilt Hope, the Noah Wilder story. They had asked to interview him, but he declined. He didn't need the world to remember his pain. He needed it to remember that kindness could still exist even after betrayal. As the narrator's voice filled the room, he heard his own story told back to him, how he donated a kidney to save his wife's father, been betrayed by both love and loyalty, and still built an empire of compassion instead of vengeance. But they didn't know the full truth. They never would. Because what he built wasn't revenge, it was redemption disguised as revenge. Outside, a knock came at the door. It was Liam, older now, carrying a brown envelope. "It's over," he said. Ethan was denied parole again. Savannah's left the state. "Looks like the story's finally done." Noah nodded slowly. "It's been done for years, Liam. They just didn't know it yet." Liam smiled faintly. "You could have ruined them completely, but you didn't." Noah looked out the window. The rain shimmered against the glass like a quiet applause from the heavens. "I didn't need to," he said. "Their own choices did the work for me." He handed Liam a check, a final payment. "No more investigations, no more past. It's time to build." That night, Noah drove to the hospital, the same one where he'd once lain after surgery. A new wing stood there now, gleaming white, built by his foundation. The plaque on the wall read, "The Carter Wilder Recovery Center." No mention of betrayal, just healing. He stood before it for a long while, the sound of rain whispering against the glass. He thought of Savannah wherever she was, now perhaps walking through a small town, invisible, carrying memories heavier than guilt. He didn't wish her harm anymore. He wished her understanding. He thought of Ethan, a man who had mistaken power for purpose, now confined to walls that mirrored the ones he'd built for others. And he thought of Samuel Carter, the man whose life had begun in this entire chain of events. Perhaps, in some strange, divine way, everything had come full circle. A nurse passing by stopped and recognized him. "Mr. Wilder," she said softly, "this place changes lives." "Thank you," he smiled faintly. "It changed mine first." When he returned home, the storm had cleared. The night sky opened above him, dark but peaceful. He sat on the porch, the cool air brushing his skin, the sound of crickets echoing like a lullaby. He closed his eyes and whispered one last line, not for revenge, not for pain, but for the quiet man he'd finally become. "I gave everything once, my heart, my body, my peace. But what I got back was freedom, and maybe that's the only thing worth keeping." The wind carried his words away, and somewhere in that silence, the world exhaled with him. Because in the end, kindness didn't make him weak, it made him immortal.